So imagine this. You run a cybersecurity company. On the surface, it looks legitimate, offering IT services, threat analysis, maybe even consulting. But behind the scenes, well, you're actually working for the Chinese government. Your real job is hacking US companies, breaking into critical infrastructure, and selling stolen data to Beijing. And for 10 years, you get away with it. No one even knows you exist. You see, that's what happened with iSoon, a Chinese hacking for hire firm just exposed in a massive DOJ indictment. For a decade, this company carried out cyber attacks on US agencies, corporations, and even pro-democracy activists. And the scariest part? Well, they're just one of many. You see, state-sponsored hacking doesn't happen the way you think. There's no dramatic Hollywood moment, no blinking red alerts. It doesn't start with a catastrophic breach. It starts small, like a paper cut. A single compromised password, a well-crafted phishing email, a software update that contains hidden malware. On their own, each one seems minor, but over time, these paper cuts weaken entire systems until, well, before you realize it, they've bled your networks dry. And that's how these cyber mercenaries work. And today, we're gonna break down exactly how they do it and what you can do to protect yourself. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Midweek Sitrep, your weekly briefing on national security law and policy. My name is Jerry Fowler, and I'm your host. Each week, I break down what you need to know and what you might have missed in the world of national security and business, all in under 20 minutes, so you can stay mission focused. Before we do a deep dive on state-sponsored cyber attacks, let's discuss what we should be monitoring in the world of national security this week. Following high-level talks in Jeddah, Ukraine agreed to a 30-day ceasefire contingent upon Russia's acceptance. This development prompted the U.S. administration to lift the pause on military support and intelligence sharing with Ukraine, aiming to pave the way for a sustainable peace agreement. Mass federal layoffs are raising some security concerns. Over 100,000 federal workers have been laid off or taken early retirement as part of efforts to reduce the federal workforce. Notably, more than 130 positions were cut from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Former NSA Cyber Director Rob Joyce warned that these cuts could severely harm the U.S.'s ability to counter cyber threats from adversaries like China. The city of Mission, Texas has requested a state of emergency following a cybersecurity incident that began on February 28th. It affected the city operations and compromised sensitive data. The attack has rendered city servers inaccessible, prompting officials to seek state assistance to manage the crisis. Wall Street grapples with AI-powered cyber threats. Financial institutions are increasingly concerned about cyber criminals leveraging generative AI for sophisticated attacks. An Accenture survey revealed that 80% of bank cybersecurity executives feel unprepared to combat AI-driven threats, despite substantial investments in cybersecurity measures. The Trump administration is contemplating a ban on Chinese AI chatbot DeepSeek across U.S. government devices due to national security concerns. The potential threat stems from DeepSeek's extensive data collection practices and storage on servers in China, which are subject to local laws requiring data sharing with the government. China has announced plans to enhance support for artificial intelligence applications, venture capital development, and other technological innovations to achieve greater self-reliance. The focus will be on future industries, including biomanufacturing, quantum technology, embodied AI, and 6G technology. Stay ahead by monitoring how these stories evolve. Now let's get into state-sponsored cyber hacking. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is a state-sponsored cyber attack? Okay, a few years ago, these attacks were primarily government-to-government operations. China's Ministry of State Security hacking the CIA, the Russian intelligence agencies going after the NSA. But today, the battlefield is shifting. Governments aren't just targeting rival intelligence agencies anymore. They're going after businesses, universities, research labs, and even individuals. Unlike typical cybercrime, where hackers are seeking financial gain through ransomware or fraud, state-sponsored cyber attacks serve national interest. These attacks are about gathering intelligence, disrupting key industries, influencing geopolitics, and, in some cases, laying the groundwork for cyber warfare. They don't just aim to steal data, they aim to weaken competition, manipulate global markets, and control the flow of information. And here's where things get even more concerning. According to the Department of Justice, governments are outsourcing their hacking operations. Instead of relying solely on government employees, some nations are now contracting private security firms to do their dirty work. These firms represent themselves as independent businesses, but in reality, they act as extensions of state intelligence agencies. They provide cover, deniability, and in many cases, the expertise needed to carry out sophisticated cyber campaigns. This means that cyber warfare is no longer confined to military intelligence circles. Now, any business, financial institution, or research lab could be a target. If your company works on advanced technology, AI, pharmaceuticals, or critical infrastructure, you may already be on a watch list. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you have. And this isn't just about stealing intellectual property. These attacks also focus on influence and control. They can disrupt supply chains, manipulate financial markets, and even spread disinformation to shape public perception. You see, cyber warfare is no longer just about espionage. It's about economic power and geopolitical dominance. So how do these attacks happen? A lot of people think cyber attacks happen in real time, like hackers furiously typing code to break into a system. But that's not how it works. These attacks start small, they're subtle, and often they begin with you. Because hackers don't need to break in. They just need you to let them in without realizing it. Maybe you get an email from your bank telling you there's a problem with your account. It looks legit. There's a logo, security warning, a link to verify your identity. You click. And just like that, you've handed over your credentials to a hacker. This is how they start, by tricking individuals into giving up information. But it doesn't stop there. Once they have access to your email, your passwords, your work login, they can escalate. They may use your workplace credentials to break into a corporate system. They might sell your data on the dark web, where another hacker buys it and uses it to steal from you later. This isn't just theoretical either. We've seen nation-state hackers steal personal data on a massive scale. In 2020, Russian hackers infiltrated a trusted software update from SolarWinds, giving them access to US government agencies, Fortune 500 companies, and cybersecurity firms. Now, this shows how a single vendor breach can compromise thousands of organizations. And if you listened to last week's episode, you'll recall the 2015 Office of Personnel Management breach, where hackers stole sensitive background check data from 4 million US government employees, including security clearance information. You'll also recall the 2017 Equifax breach, where Chinese hackers stole personal and financial data of 147 million Americans, including social security numbers, credit scores, and bank info. Now let's think about that for a second. 147 million Americans. That's nearly half the country exposed in a single breach. And that's just one attack. These aren't random hacks or low-level cyber criminals looking for a quick payday. This is intelligence warfare. Okay, so at the beginning, we talked about the iSoon indictment. So let's get into the details. So the US Department of Justice recently unsealed an indictment against 12 Chinese nationals tied to iSoon, the Chinese cybersecurity firm accused of conducting state-sponsored cyber espionage. The indictment alleges that iSoon operated as a hacker-for-hire outfit, working directly with China's Ministry of Public Security and Ministry of State Security to infiltrate government agencies, private companies, and political dissidents worldwide. The targets ranged from the U.S. federal and state agencies, including the Department of Treasury, to foreign ministries in Asia, and even a major U.S.-based religious organization. According to the charges, iSoon leveraged sophisticated hacking tools, including an automated penetration testing platform to craft phishing attacks, a password cracking system dubbed Divine Mathematician, and a social media monitoring tool used to track global sentiment. The company reportedly charged anywhere from $10,000 to $75,000 per compromised email box, generating millions in revenue while acting as a key player in China's cyber espionage strategy. This case highlights a growing trend: the intersection of private enterprise and state-sponsored hacking. While iSoon posed as a cybersecurity firm, it was effectively an arm of the Chinese government, carrying out cyber intrusions on demand. The indictment sheds light on how the Chinese state leveraged private contractors for intelligence gathering, making it harder to trace attacks directly back to the government agencies. So we know about the DOJ indictment, and also that the Treasury Department sanctioned additional hacking firms as a result. But if you're like me, you're wondering, do DOJ indictments and OFAC sanctions actually work? Well, there's a massive problem. These hackers will likely never be arrested. They live in China, which won't extradite them. And the sanctions? Well, they help. But hackers don't need US bank accounts. They use crypto, offshore networks, and fake identities. The bottom line here is the US can expose these hackers, but it's almost impossible to stop it. Businesses have to protect themselves. Okay, let's talk to the business leaders. Whether you're the CEO or work in another function, cyber warfare is at your door. There are 4 topics you need to address with your decision makers. The first is cyber threats aren't just about IT anymore. They are a boardroom level risk that can result in lost revenue, lawsuits, and regulatory fines. If your company gets hacked, customers will lose trust in you, and you could face serious legal consequences. The second topic is that state-sponsored hackers are not just going after governments. They're targeting companies for intellectual property, trade secrets, and access to supply chains. Look at what happened with the SolarWinds hack. One company was compromised, and it impacted thousands of businesses. Now, the third topic is the need to prioritize vendor security and incident response planning. Your biggest risk comes from vendors, those third-party partners who have access to your data. Hackers often breach weak links in the supply chain. You need to vet all vendors, require cybersecurity audits, and have an incident response plan ready in case of an attack. And if you need help with that, reach out to professionals. The last topic is one that's on every CEO's mind: the cost. A cyber attack can cost you millions in downtime, lost customers, and regulatory fines. Preventative security, like real-time threat detection, multi-factor authentication, and vendor audits, is far cheaper than the cost of recovery. Okay, so here's a free practice tip. Decision makers are action-based. Don't go to them with only a problem. Bring the solution. And that solution begins with training employees to recognize phishing scams, vetting your vendors to ensure that the ones that have access to your systems are safe, and requiring multi-factor authentication for all logins. You know, your employees don't have to be cybersecurity experts, but they do need to know that if something feels off, they should stop and verify. Okay, so here's some more free information to give to your IT department or your CEO or decision maker. Don't think you're alone in this. The US government isn't just warning businesses about cyber threats. It's actively working with private companies to stop them. And that's where the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA's, public-private partnership comes in. So you'll want to Google the program, but here are some highlights to share with your company. Threat intelligence sharing. CISA provides real-time cyber threat data to companies so they can detect and prevent attacks before they escalate. They offer incident response support, offering technical assistance and mitigation strategies to help recover faster, free cybersecurity tools like vulnerability scanning, risk assessments, and best practices. And there's the Shields Up initiative that during high threat periods, CISA issues alerts, guidance, and security recommendations to help businesses protect themselves. Cybersecurity is now a shared responsibility. The government's offering resources to help private companies defend themselves, but it's up to you to take advantage of them. Now, a lot of people may think, why would hackers care about me? I'm not in government. I don't work for a big company. I don't have state secrets. But here's the truth. State-sponsored hackers aren't just after governments. They're after data. And if you have an online account, you have the data they want. Maybe it's your email, your password. Maybe your company's entire network depends on that one login you've never bothered to secure. Cybercriminals don't need to hack your employer if they can just trick you into clicking the wrong link. So here's your challenge. Take 5 minutes today to lock down your accounts. Do these 3 things right now. Enable multi-factor authentication everywhere. If an attacker gets your password, this is the best way to keep them out. Watch out for phishing emails. If you weren't expecting an email or a link, don't click it. Hackers rely on human error more than technical skill. Use unique passwords for every account. If you reuse passwords, a single data breach could give hackers access to everything. Use a password manager. It's worth it. Small actions can stop attacks before they begin. The best defense isn't expensive cybersecurity software. It's awareness. So take 5 minutes, lock it down, and stay ahead of the game. You should come away from this episode with a renewed mission of preparedness. The stakes are high, and whether you like it or not, you're on the battlefield. You don't have to be a government agency or a Fortune 500 company to be a target. If you have data, if you have access, if you're connected to something bigger than yourself, you are part of this fight. The difference between being vulnerable and being prepared comes down to action. Not later, not when it's too late, now. If you're running a business, bring in the right people. Cyber threats evolve faster than policies and regulations. Work with cybersecurity professionals, conduct risk assessments, and make security a core part of your business strategy, not an afterthought. If you're protecting your personal data, treat it like it matters, because it does. Secure your accounts, stay informed, and don't assume that it won't happen to you. Cyberwarfare isn't coming. It's already here. The only question is, are you ready? Well, that's it for today's Midweek Sitrep. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share, and stay engaged. While you're at it, stop by our store and pick up some merch. Link in the description. I'm Jerry Fowler, and remember, everything is national security. See you next time. The information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or professional advice. Listeners should consult with a qualified professional before making any decision based on the content discussed. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any government agency, the U.S. military, or any employer, organization, or entity with which we are affiliated. Mention of a company, product, or service in this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation. Any references are for information purposes only. This podcast does not disclose any classified, proprietary, or confidential information. Discussions are based on publicly available information and personal expertise.